Welcome back to episode 33 of the Grappling Growth podcast with me, Joe Testori. On today's episode, I was joined by Dan Bedi. He is a serial founder, exited multiple businesses, and just a really, really cool guy. I connected with Dan. This was actually from a cold outreach back in 2019. So he was looking for someone to help him with some marketing. We got in contact, and I believe the reason why he chose to work with us at the time is because we just led with value. But that isn't the point. Dan is someone who I've seen as a bit of a mentor, really. He's done some really cool stuff. He has an MBA under his belt, exited multiple businesses, and is just genuinely a really caring, kind person. What I love about Dan is he's always led with great intentions and has always looked at how he can piece people together. He's probably one of the best networkers I know, and that's probably one asset and attribute that's helped him scale his businesses and exit. So he's a great guy. In this podcast, we talk about what it was like to travel for him, how it was to grow his businesses. One of the questions we asked was, how would you go about starting a tech business that solves real world problems and allows you to exit in 3 to 5 years? And he, as someone who's done it, gives such a great breakdown. So if you're looking at scaling your business and exiting in a few years' time, then this podcast could be for you. Thank you for tuning in. If you've got any feedback, please leave comments on our Instagram, on our YouTube, all over the place, and like, subscribe. Take care. Bye.
As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testori, and the Grappling Growth podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy.
Dan, welcome to the pod. Good to have you on.
Jack.
Likewise. So Dan, my opening question to you is, what does growth look like to you?
I think if you looked at the textbook definition of growth, it would be, essentially taking something from point A to point B, and that can come in many flavors. Revenues, taking them, from zero up to, whatever it would be, and growing them, as well as, growth personally. There's growth just across a product as well, and, a product roadmap and how that might expand and continue to grow. So it can look across loads of different aspects, but effectively, I think I would define it as taking something from point A to point B, and that place you end up in the future is different, an enhancement and evolution of where you started off.
And to a more intrinsic base, what does growth look like to you?
How do you mean from an intrinsic base?
That's like looking at a business from a business lens. What about personally to you on a personal development basis?
I think personal growth takes lots of different forms. I think it's a journey that everyone should be on and always be striving to be on. I'm a big advocate for personal growth, right? And just trying to be better than you were yesterday, even in marginal terms. I think it's super, super important and super interesting how you can always look to pursue goals, grow yourself, grow your mind, and make sure that you're always just striving to be better, I think would be fair to say. And I think there's a quote by Vincent Lombardi, who was I'm not overly familiar on the American sports, but let's say the Sir Alex Ferguson of American coaches. He says, winning isn't everything, but wanting to win is. And I love that quote because I think that pretty much encapsulates it's not always about the outcome, the metric, the result. It's actually about wanting to win, wanting to improve. And for me, personal growth is that. And I think it's on for me personally, it's on a number of fronts. It's definitely making sure that if life is consistently juggling balls, you've got work, friends, family, health, making sure that you're growing all of those aspects of your life consistently, right? Deeper relationships and trying to see more and help more of your friends, your partner and your loved ones, your family, as well as, from a health perspective and a work perspective, you're continually trying to grow on all of those fronts consistently, and just get better every day. And, whether that's more healthy.
That's a nice and more in-depth answer really. With regards to you there. And what I find with a lot of people who I speak to, we're roughly in the same age range, give or take a few years, but I always think of what would I say to my 20-year-old self. So looking back, and just say we've got the hindsight bias, what advice would you give to 20-year-old Dan or to a 20-year-old that's listening to the podcast right now?
it's a great question. I think the other part of that jigsaw is, would your 20-year-old self listen to you now? Is the other reality of it. And I think there's probably a lot of parents that can nod up and down and say, yeah, I've given my child some advice, and they just won't hear it. And I think a part of that is you've got to find your own path as well. Like, sometimes you can't be told, and you want to forge your own path and find your own path. But I think definitely like some sage advice would be trying to keep your options open in terms of whatever that might be in life. And actually, like, you realize, and even just taking work or a job, sometimes you settle down into a job, you buy a house, you get a mortgage, and you're effectively tied on a certain path, and that doesn't necessarily leave a lot of freedom for choices or other things. And trying to keep your options as wide as possible, try and new things, really, whether that's traveling, whether that's meeting new people, whether that's new experiences. I'm not just talking about work, just in general life, because the world moves, people change, and life evolves. And actually, you want to have tried loads of different things when you're about age 20, before you really settle on a path and say, this is me, this is what I like doing, this is what I don't like doing, this is who I like and who I don't like in terms of people I want to surround myself with. And effectively, that is a great time for you to just experience all of those things. So kind of say yes to everything and try out loads of different stuff, and just use that time to really find out who you are and who you want to be. And I think that would be a good, rather than setting goals and metrics and I must be here at this age and must be that. I think trying to discover who you are and who you are not is, definitely
that's a really
some advice I'd be giving to
profound answer. That's got me thinking. What, out of all the things you did before you started Jaffa, and I know you've got an MBA under your belt, what would you say were some of the most profound things that you did? I recall that I think you went to South America traveling back in 2016 or around then.
We did, it was definitely earlier than that as well. We did post-university, some friends and I chose to do gap year, effectively, like old school gap year, finished uni, we're going traveling, one-way ticket type thing. At the time, I don't even know if they're still around, STA Travel. I don't know how they've back then we went into the store to book it, so that gives you an insight into how long ago that might have been. I don't know if they've transitioned to the digital transformation that is where they might be now, but hopefully they're going good, because we got a round the world ticket. So we ended up doing 11 months away from the UK, and we ended up doing Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, Fiji, New Zealand, into South America, Chile, Peru, Bolivia, Argentina, Brazil, home. So a proper year or 11 months traveling. And that was fantastic experience. I'm so glad we did it, because for nothing else, you really don't get that opportunity every day to just drop whatever you're doing and just have the opportunity to do that completely free. And it's only when you get a bit older that you realize, actually, that I'll just get a job and then do it. It's just, a lot of people have said that, those types of things, and still have managed to do elements of it, but a really big extended trip like that, with no worries as well. It wasn't like I need to go and find myself and reinvent myself trip. It was just, no, I want to go to these places, so let's go. And that was it. So we did, and it was fantastic. And that was definitely if you wrap it into one experience, a hell of a experience, and met loads of amazing people, loads of amazing experiences, some fantastic memories. And that's definitely a highlight, let's say, of.
And from that trip, what are the most profound, prominent experiences that you went on or you did while you were out there?
Oh God, some highlights. We did. New Zealand was stunning, just geographically and aesthetically as a country. Beautiful country. We ended up getting a camper van and driving like like a Toyota. I don't know what I think it's a Previa, but kind of like the bigger ones, and like a Prius with a bit more on it. But it had like a bed in the back and a small kitchen. And we drove that around New Zealand, and they do the very extreme sports in New Zealand, so the bungee jump. So we did the Nevis bungee jump, which was like 137 meters, maybe 140 meters, something like that, like multiple seconds, 8-9 seconds free fall. So that was pretty cool. You don't get to do that every day. That's definitely a highlight. Brazil was a country as well, was phenomenal. And Bolivia, we ended up working in Bolivia for a month, in La Paz, in a hostel. Essentially, we were at the very end towards the end of our trip at that point. So we were running low on cash, let's say. So we were basically making ends meet by doing some bar work. And Death Road in La Paz. I think they've done a Top Gear episode on that. Very narrow road. You can still drive on it, but you effectively rent mountain bikes and you just go down it. And it's like a sheer, I don't know how many 100-foot drop on the other side of it. There's no barriers or anything. So if you get it wrong and go off, you're having a very different trip. The end of it might be pretty quick at that point. That was definitely a highlight. There's definitely some big highlights.
Kind of piecing together traveling fantastic. To business, and you're a serial founder, and that's how we connected through Jaffa Insight Analysis. For you, because I find this personally, when I go away, I get really creative. It's like you hear lots of people, they say their best ideas come when they're in the shower or they're going for a walk. Did traveling in that stint, did that lead into Jaffa, or did that kind of get your creative juices flowing to then look at starting your own businesses and going into that side of things?
Yeah, it's interesting. There was certainly not a moment, a single moment, like an epiphany that I can point to and be like, this is great. I think maybe learning through osmosis or just listening to other people. There was a lot of other people that were traveling that had experiences in the workplace and not. And there's one theme I think that was maybe coming through, which is kind of like two things. One, you kind of have to make your own path a little bit. And like traveling is a great example of like, you can choose to go anywhere at any moment, at any point. It's just, you've got no strings. Like, I want to do that today. I want to go there today. I want to do that. Or I've met someone and they're doing that and I'll just do that as well. And I suppose indirectly that shows you that you can create your own path as well. It's not just like, that's nice to do. You can do it. And probably that you can accomplish more than you think you can actually as well. So I think that probably seeded thoughts that if I want to do my own thing at some point, I can. But it certainly was. I mean, when I came back, I went into the workplace and learned loads of, had a good time, learned a lot of lessons. But I always had that itch you wanted to scratch, that gnawing piece saying, not just you can do it yourself. Like, I want to do it and I want to have a go at something myself. How do I put together the pieces of a jigsaw to do that effectively? And I think traveling maybe indirectly played a piece in that. I think it definitely showed me what is possible, right? More than anything else, is you can accomplish a lot more and you can do it yourself. You can forge your own path. And that's nothing to do with business or work, but I think indirectly that probably did lead to that. But there was not an epiphany moment. There was not a kind of the seas parting and saying, oh yes, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. This is exactly what I'm going to be. Definitely was, not a moment like that. But I'd be probably indirectly, some of those seeds were probably planted around about that time.
What I found so cool about you is you haven't been strict with your pathway, and you've intertwined between being a founder, getting your MBA, doing some fractional work and going into the organizations. And I remember we spoke, I think it was December 2022, and I think this is a mindset that a lot of younger guys have, and I admittedly had before, that if you worked in a job, you're a failure. That's honestly how I viewed it a few years ago. And I thought, actually, we need people who are working in jobs in this world. Otherwise, the system, the mechanics would not work. But B, there are some really, really cool opportunities within the right companies. And there's a lot of room to scale further up. Could you kind of just touch upon some of the best experiences you've had as a founder, and B, working in really immersive and cool companies?
Yeah, I think, and look, there's not every job is the same, right? I think a lot of the time is the people you work with, the mission you're on, and your day to day. What are you doing? You know, what are you actually making an impact? Are you actually working towards something maybe a bit greater, or something that hasn't been done before, or something which is cutting edge? Or are you meeting cool people? Are you growing? Back to that personal growth piece. And there are some jobs that give you none of that. And there are some jobs that give you all of that, or at least enough of that to make it worthwhile. And actually, if you are progressing and growing as a person, you know, there's a lot to be said for that. And actually, you know, everyone can always improve. Like, I think you get a lot of founders that can look to improve via a job, like longer term. And I think there's a lot of people in the workplace that could, you know, certainly broaden their horizons and learn a lot by being a founder and actually empathizing with the stress and the other things that go with running a business. And yeah, I think as a founder, you've either, for me, well, you've either spotted an opportunity that isn't going away and it's gnawing at you, and either you're going to do something about it or someone else is going to do something about it. And I didn't want to be that person. You know, you're in the world of work, you've worked your whole life, you've been on a very kind of linear career path, and let's just say it's, you know, law or banking or whatever, and you're here and you made partner and you're sitting at your dinner table and you've got a family and all the other things that you may or may not want in your life. But for me, that was my plan, and, you know, what I still want and working towards still. And, you know, you might meet someone, a daughter's friend, or you know, is someone else that's a lot younger, and they've gone out and they've done something and they've made their own business and they've sold it. And I always knew that I'd be sitting there going, oh, I'm jealous, effectively. Like, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd had that experience. And as soon as I had that realization, I was like, look, that pushed me into, yeah, I want to give this a go. I want to have that experience. I want to, you know, have those learnings, and I want to do that. And also in the workplace, you know, you also look at that, and there's a lot to be said for being a part of something which is going on its own journey and helping others, helping yourself, helping, you know, the company and its customers, and the value you're creating to really push that business forwards as well, and be successful. And I think life changes as well behind the scenes, and different things, you know, change. Having your own business is fantastic for a lot of things. Working in a company and having a bit of stability and, you know, learning and improving as well also is fantastic too. I think both things at different times in life have their parts to play. And yeah, individuals, if they can and are lucky enough to sit on both sides and choose what they do to some extent, yeah, I think there's some real positives on both sides. And I would certainly encourage most people to experience both. I think there's a lot of people that have maybe just only ever founded their business or a business or businesses and been entrepreneurs. And there's some people that have only ever done the work and, you know, just kind of had a job and gone on that career path. There's no right or wrong in it, but there's a whole world on the other side that you maybe haven't experienced or could experience, and you'd either love it or hate it. But either way, it's probably an interesting thing to look at. So on that personal growth journey. So yeah, for me, it was different things at different times, but being a founder, scratching that itch and doing something about a problem that you'd seen. And then on the other side, yeah, look, getting and being a part of some exciting journeys with some fantastic people, doing interesting things, and yeah, continuing to improve and build effectively. If you want to put a theme behind it all, you're building things, you're building towards things. And yeah, that can come in founder or
There's so much to go in there
if you get the right company.
into there. And I don't know how much you can delve into this, but what are you most proud of achieving in business?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think definitely if we look at, there's a lot of people that have ideas. Some ideas are great, some ideas are not so great. Some ideas are fantastic and then turn not so great, and so much can happen. But having the volition to take an idea in your head, do something about it, obtain followership to some extent, whether that's first employees, co-founders, investors, customers, consistently growing that idea into a thing. And that thing can be deemed valuable, not valuable, but even just that taking something and doing something about it and actually then getting it to a point where it starts to live on its own a little bit, I think for me, that journey, which I've done in a few different flavors, but especially with Jaffa, is definitely what I'd say I'd be most proud of is taking that and creating everything we did off the back of it, which was a very much a journey, but certainly an enjoyable one at times, stressful one at times as well.
But that's cool.
Definitely something to be proud
and I
of.
remember you telling me the story of you started Jaffa with your two founders. Were they from your MBA?
Yeah, so we did. So I did it actually just to kind of tie that in. One of the reasons I wanted to do the MBA was two things. One, I wanted to grow personally, and I wanted to kind of round off edges and just learn more. And I thought that was a fantastic opportunity to do that. And secondly, I thought, well, two things. Being a full-time MBA was what I did. Being a full-time student was an excellent opportunity to take some time out of work and traditional working in a job and dedicate some time to setting up my own business, as well as also selfishly knowing that if the business didn't succeed, you've always got your MBA, you've invested in yourself, and you're almost going to, hopefully, in theory, nothing's ever given, but slot into the workplace at a certain level. So I thought, look, this is great. I could do both. I can kind of, career progression on one side and selfishly create my own business on the other side. And whilst on the MBA, I met, two fantastic individuals, James and Omar. And that was the initial co-founding team that, took effectively what was an idea and a student project in various flavors into fully fledged business and raising investment and starting that journey, which we did.
There's so many things to unpack there, from meeting your co-founders to, as you mentioned, you're probably most proud of taking what most people sit on is ideas and then moving it over to actual concept that various stakeholders have invested in, whether that's team members, employees, co-founders, clients, customers, investors, going into there. And what I've always, I guess, a world it feels so alien and foreign to me is how to raise investment or how to go and look for investment. So I guess if you and I were just on a walk having a coffee and I just said, Dan, I want to look at avenues to look at finding investors, what advice would you give to me personally?
Honestly, I used to have an answer for this, and now you've never seen it all, but I've seen all sorts. I've seen businesses that are profitable, really well run, and you've got a real need with a massive market that can't raise a pound. And I've seen businesses that are horrifically loss making. Is there even a market for this? Question mark. Teams internally fighting each other, doesn't like each other, and they can go and raise off the back of a envelope, millions of pounds. And it's like, where does it sit on the spectrum? And I think it all depends. But ultimately it boils down to, can you convince someone, and it is always a someone, whether that's a partner at a VC firm or an angel investor or a friend or a family, whatever it might be, it's a someone, right? There is not algorithms that are just deploying capital typically for an equity perspective. So you've got to convince somebody, whether it's their money or someone else's money that they're managing, can this idea do what you say it's going to do, whatever that might be? And ultimately, are people going to buy it, or a business is going to buy whatever it is you're selling? Can that scale? And most importantly, can you execute and do that? Whether that's you and your team or as an individual, are you going to be able to do what you say you're going to do? And is that whatever you're going to do interesting, big enough, and it depends on who's asking, all the rest of it, going to change the world, or is it just enough to get people to buy it, and is that going to provide a return? And I think that is a bit of a myth as well in investment. I don't think all investors are looking at it from a financial perspective. They're not all looking at it from an ROI and a investment return. There's some amazing green tech and climate changing businesses that are just saying, look, we're not here to make millions of pounds for you and create amazing, investment returns and multiples. We're here to change the world, and we're here to get people changing their behaviors, get people doing more of this, reduce their carbon footprints, and that's what we're going to do. And we've built a fantastic product to allow people to do that. And do you want to invest in that? And I think that's just as important to say that there are a lot of investors out there that are very happy to invest in that kind of a journey. And it is a journey you go on, just as much as there are investors to say, look, this thing prints money and is going to be fantastically profitable and is going to pay me loads of multiples and returns, and I'll invest in that. And I think actually you've just got to find your own journey. But if you're taking money from someone, I think you are obliged and indebted to that individual, whether it's for equity or not, to do what you say you're going to do and move the needle from A to B, or at least attempt to move the needle from A to B on the plan. And plans change for sure, but on that kind of wider vision that you've set out with. So yeah, I think that's a very broad answer, but all sorts of people raise money in all sorts of different ways. And I think nuts and bolts is, can you convince somebody to invest in you and your ability to execute on a vision which is something that they want to be a part of, that exciting journey, whether that's building amazing products, changing the world, creating loads of money. Every different person has different objectives.
I think that's similar to what I've learned running a marketing agency for, it'll actually be 7 years come next month. But what I've realized, which I didn't realize years ago, is that pretty much anything and everything works, whether it's paid ads or outreach or cold messaging, SEO, everything works. It's just how well does it work? And I think an example is Thursday Dating. They started, I think, as Honeypot, and their tactic was massive guerrilla marketing on and throughout the streets of London, where the founders, and they're really cool guys. I remember having a meeting with them years ago about getting involved in the business. But George and I can't remember the other guy's name. Anyways, they would go around.
I was exactly in the same perspective. I was like, hey, George was definitely one of them. I can't remember the other founder's name, but it's I've seen that journey from afar.
And they'd be on the streets and they would put posters. I'm holding this sign out because I cheated on my girlfriend and she's made me do this as a punishment. And it was all viral. And I think what people need to learn about, you can take inspiration from brands like this, but we know for a fact if someone else tried to replicate that exact same model, been there, done that, it's boring, it's not going to work. You need to come up with something completely new. And I remember you got me in contact with a mate of yours, Dan, who started a travel startup a couple of years ago, but he went out to Silicon Valley, went around doing the rounds and eventually found someone. And I think I know he doesn't run his travel startup anymore and he's just doing a few crazy things. But again, there's no one size fits all approach, and pretty much anything and everything works.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think there's different things work at different times for different reasons, and if you can create your own wave or be a part of a wave, then certainly things can happen. But there's definitely some themes that exist, and we can both, comment on some of those, where doing stuff the traditional way a lot of the time doesn't really cut through the noise from a marketing perspective. And yeah, you've just got, as I say, find your own path a little bit, and that's definitely whether that's business or personal.
Yeah, definitely. So Dan,
part of the journey.
We've got a part on the podcast where we get a question from the internet, and it reads: fellow entrepreneur asked, how do we go about starting a tech business that solves real world problems and we can make it an exitable product within the next 3 to 5 years?
The age-old question, yeah, how to create a scaling tech business and sell it ultimately. So, but I think if we kind of break that down, right, it all depends on a lot of things. Tech is, and the one thing I've learned from building tech businesses is tech never stands still. So there's never a world where you can just build a product and then leave it and then it just works and it runs. It doesn't work like that. You need to consistently optimize it. You need to consistently improve it. Things will change. Apple update their app store guidelines and their iOS every September typically, or every year that changes. They change the rules. People change devices. The whole world consistently changed, and I think that's consistently changes. And I think that's the whole point of building a tech business is it is scalable, but it comes with the cost of it always has to keep moving with the times, right? And that means it's expensive typically, or it's more expensive than some other businesses that are a bit more traditional. A property business, I build a house, it's going to be a house for a long time, and I can sell and rent that house effectively. Is very different to a tech business. I built a software product, I can sell it, customers like it, but then I also need customer support, and I need to be able to make sure that it's always working and always on and it's always available, and it's also potentially moving with the times as the world changes, and there's even just looking, just hypothetically, Apple could decide that we don't like phones the way they are anymore. We're going to make them all a circle or Google Glasses, and it's now everyone, in 5 years everyone's doing that, and you've built a business that's great over here but doesn't move. So making sure that you have the ability to scale it as best you can is important. And I think because it's expensive and because it's always changing, what's super, super, super important is to build something hyper valuable to customers, and validate that as quickly and as cheaply as possible, as soon as possible. Because if you start off on this track and it's not completely nailed value proposition wise, the difficulty is you end up then building foundations that are potentially wrong and then very expensive to reset and change, and then it limits your scalability. So you've got to be crystal clear that you've hit product market fit, as they call it, before you really start scaling that. So how can you build a tech business quickly, cheaply, and validate super quick? Trying to go as conceptual as possible and test. Instead of building an app for X, could you find a way to do that in the real world, for example, right? So if we were rebuilding Jaffa, hypothetically, which, just for context, was a mobile app for football fans that put all the news in one place with a almost like a glorified football forum, so a kind of chat room for fans just to chat and engage. Instead of building a tech business and doing that, what could we do to validate the key points of that business? Could we just get a load of mates down the pub and start talking football and see how long that goes on for? What do they talk about? Why do they talk about it? And really drill into the questions, like, why are you talking about that? Why is that interesting? Where else do you talk about that? Who else do you talk about that with? Who do you hate talking about that with? What else do you talk about? That would be, so effectively a focus group, but it's down the pub. So it's like, it's a very cheap in the grand scheme, even if you were paying for the drinks or not drinking as well, because that is very much on trend right now. But if everyone's there, you can get all of that insight about what people would like as a focus group before you even think about building an app, right? To which could be very expensive. And that also then might signpost all the ideas of, is this good? And then you could, elaborate on that. Well, would you download an app? Would you use an app? And they might say yes. And this is the other thing, is you need to test everything, because people might say they might do something, but what they say versus what they do is a very different ballgame. So making sure that you've tried to test it as much as possible, right? And pretty much you can get your hands on, or you should be able to get your hands on, some cheap Google ad credits, for example, or you can find someone, a mate who works in marketing. Can you buy traffic, for example, cheaply, couple of £100, for example, Google typically gives out as a free AdWords voucher if you open an AdSense account. So could I just buy £200 worth of ads and point it and say amazing football fan app, for example, on maybe a landing page, and point £200 worth of ads there and see if people click? And if they click, it's great, because if I point £200 worth of ads there and no one clicks, maybe it's not the best idea in the world. Maybe it needs to change. So before I build this fantastic app for it, is there points and hurdles that I can do to validate, and then build from there, and then what is the product, what are you selling, and and then would people, same thought process, would people then pay for that? How much would they pay for that? And it depends on the business that you want to set up, but effectively like that all those steps, which are very talked about in loads of different ways, but I think for me, trying to do that as quickly as possible in as cheap a way as possible to just see if this is an idea even worth putting time towards, and would people be interested in it, would they pay for it? And then you start getting into how big is it, can it scale, how much is it even going to cost to build, all of those types of things. But ultimately, in terms of exit, if you build something that users find valuable or customers find valuable, and you are successful, and that's a big enough pie or big enough market, someone somewhere will be interested in helping that grow or being a part of that and taking it on and buying it. And I think if you can validate, execute, and showcase in traction that this is big and it's going to get bigger, you will hopefully be lucky enough to have the types of conversations that will allow you to put those options on the table. But if you don't deliver value to the customers, don't deliver value to the users, don't set up the tech so it can scale and showcase the big enough opportunity, it's very hard to drive towards
absolute gold there. I had so many points where I could have come in with follow-up questions, which you just summarized everything, and then you answer the last bit of the question as to this is how you can exit. My question to you, and I guess again, this is a selfish question. When you're going into business negotiations, and I know you've been in tons, how do you go about pricing personally and ultimately getting a fair deal for both parties?
Well, I think the truth is, right, price is what someone's willing to pay for it at the end of the day, right? And it's very easy to get lost or confused, just because somebody's, let's just hypothetically, we've got an amazing tech business, right? And it could be worth a monthly retainer, or like a SaaS business, right? So monthly recurring revenue. Is it £1,000 a month subscription, or is it £100 a month subscription, or is it £10,000 a month subscription? And if it's £10,000 a month subscription, just because one person says yes, I'll pay for that, doesn't necessarily mean there's a market for it, right? How many of them are there? Are they all like that? If it's £1,000 a month, it gets same questions all the way down. And if it's £100 a month, I'm going to need a lot of businesses to be able to, or customers to be able to say, yes, this is great, to then scale it. So how big is that? So I think it's just about trying to look at, from a negotiation standpoint, like who's willing to pay this for it, and how many of them are there, and how quick can I get to them? Because the other thing is, if you need a 100-person sales force to get one 10,000 person paying customer, the numbers obviously, hypothetically don't add up. And if my CAC to LTV from a marketing perspective is way off, and it costs me so much money to get these customers, and it doesn't scale, it's a problem. And I think it's just drilling down to the unit economics of a business. Those have to stack up. And I think when you get to, the latter stage, more serious investor conversations, it's all about the unit economics. Do they saturate? Do they stay the same? And you know this from a marketing perspective. Just because you can go and get users, customers at £1, well, there might only be 100 customers at £1 that you can get, and then the price might go up to £10 a customer, and then it starts to look very different. And then it's £100 a customer, and then it's like, oh, now we've got different things as you scale. So effectively, like from a growth perspective, you need to kind of have your eye on the unit metrics, and those unit metrics will dance straight through to negotiations of what do you need it to be to make it work? Because no one, there's a lot of people out there that can spend £2 marketing to get £1 of revenue, for example. It's a bit of a fool's game and a bit of a zero-sum game, because you're just effectively going to be making a loss for forever. And I know there's been a cycle of businesses that have done that and grown and then sold. But ultimately, I think you need to keep it very, very simple. I think Gary Neville was saying this. He's like, people told me all this stuff in football about business. And I just thought, if you can bring in more money than you're sending out each month, that's surely a good place. And I think that's such a, simple place to start. As long as you're bringing in more money than you're spending and you've got your unit metrics sorted of what it needs to be, I think from that point, you know where your range of negotiation is. And you just got to be super interesting and super careful, because not all negotiations are equal. That one massive logo, that case study that might change your business is super, super valuable. But also discounting to a point of it's a loss maker for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small world, word might get around and you end up discounting all the time, and then your metrics are completely screwed. So it's just about trying to find that right time, right place, and be firm. You know where your metrics are, know when to walk away, and stand by it, because otherwise, it could start compounding.
Right now, I'm reading Competitive Strategy by Michael Porter, and I mean his just business literature is second to none in my opinion. I've read his Harvard Business Review and sorts, and he speaks about just negotiation, bargaining power, and strategically, a lot of big firms will not go into price drive their suppliers too much, because they know if they price drive them, the quality will probably skimper, therefore it's not worth it. And I've seen it time and time again, where I'm sure you've probably seen it, but I've been negotiating with clients and I've had people just want unbelievably stupid guarantees or promises, and I think I've learned as I've got older just to turn around and say, how can I do that, and then just walk away. And even it's the sunk cost fallacy. Even if I've been negotiating with someone for 3-4 months, I need to have the strength to turn around and say, actually, it really doesn't work for my business, because as you said, word gets around, you turn around and you price drive massively, and then they tell someone else and it's, oh, well, you did this and this for this person. You essentially just get caught with your pants down, and again, a zero sums game there. Away from that, sorry.
Well, you get what you pay for, don't you? Yeah, so I was going to say, you get what you pay for, and I think even just looking at something like recruitment, sometimes it's great to use recruiters, sometimes not. But if you say to a recruiter, and they've got a load of customers that pay 20% for it, for example, and you're like, right, we've got to do it at 10%. Where are they going to place the best candidates? They're going to place them at the people that are paying them a little bit more and having a good relationship. And actually, sometimes you've got to give a little bit more to get what you actually want at the end of it, which is, whatever the relationship might be. So I think being too harsh in negotiation sometimes isn't great from both parties. And I think everyone wants to walk away in a good place, but having felt like they've given a little bit up. I think some people, when they walk away resentful, it just starts off on a bad foot, and you need to make sure that you've got a fair deal but a good deal.
Definitely. So the question to you, Dan, and this question always excites me when I ask people, is what are your top 3 book recommendations with regards to business?
To be fair, I read a lot. Actually, that is a lie. I don't read. I listen to audiobooks, because that's how I find I'm quicker at consuming knowledge. And I think it's not going to be in my top 3, but I think it's the 4-day working week. I can't remember the exact book, but it was essentially saying, listen. 4-hour work week. That's the one. Listen to podcasts, audiobooks in the gym. So I listen to one of those. I try and do 100 books a year on audiobook, just to kind of get through it. And I've successfully done that for a few years now, and that's meant I've read a lot of books. And I definitely would say everyone's got different type. The ones I love are about true stories, obviously, because that's kind of the business side of books, and typically either autobiographies or stories of people's journeys. And I think
just throw a few out, actually.
It's hard to pick 3 because I've got a few. Okay, I've got a few. The Hard Thing About Hard Things is definitely in the top 3 for sure. I mean, that's Horowitz of Andreessen, or it's either Mark Andreessen or it's Horowitz. I can't remember the exact one, but yeah, Hard Thing About Hard Things. And he talks about building, scaling, I think 3 different businesses he'd IPO'd, and especially dealing with execs and senior leaders and the challenges that come up. Super book. Would recommend that to anyone, entrepreneur or in the world of work. That is a great book. Hard Thing About Hard Things.
That's a great book.
Phil Knight, Shoe Dog, is great, about the story of Nike. It's a good book. There's a few of that kind of ilk. The Ride of a Lifetime, Bob Iger, that's a good one, which is talks about his journey the journey of building Disney. That was super interesting. There's a few actually. I think so let's pick a few. Of the kind of like entrepreneurs, Let My People Go Surfing, which is the story of Patagonia. And actually that's a really interesting book about how to build something completely different. Arguably didn't even want to build a business. They just wanted to go rock climbing and build amazing things for rock climbers. And that's super interesting. There's a few around the big tech businesses. Chaos Monkeys is quite a good one around. I think that's around Facebook. So yeah, there's definitely a few books in that. I'd need to look at the list, but they're definitely like some of the highlights I'd say about anyone, entrepreneur or not, could read. And it's just fascinating to hear about those journeys of how those books are put together. And to be fair, actually, I'd give one more, which is different, but it's Michelle Obama's book. I think the first one, Becoming, which doesn't talk about business necessarily, but she talks about their journey, different journey around, their life together, Barack, the careers they gave up, both were, Barack Obama and Michelle Obama were very senior lawyers and had a very successful law career ahead of them, and both obviously didn't pursue that to pursue what they have done. There's no guarantee they're going to become president or all the rest of it. And actually her perspective being she's a very impressive lady in her own right, but in her eyes, to some extent, being the second part of that jigsaw, being, the behind the scenes for Barack to go on and fulfill his dreams. And I think that's a really important point as well of having your own entrepreneurial business and journey, is how that impacts others around you, whether they be friends, family, your other halves. It is stressful. There is a lot of support that they provide in different ways typically, and that has an impact and a toll on them. And I think if you, without giving it away, if you read that book, it will give you a very clear insight into why she is not pursuing becoming president herself or looking at even doing that again. Because if you read the book, she talks about what it actually looks like day to day and what she feels that she has given already in support and everything else. And she's kind of, tapped out at this point from her book, and that would be me paraphrasing. But yeah, it's a very good book to read from a different perspective.
I'll paraphrase Elon Musk here, but he said, a lot of people look at my life and they want to do what I'm doing. But if you were to give up the cost of what I have to do on a daily basis in order to do what I do, I think 999 people out of 1,000 would say no. And you can see what he's doing with Twitter, X, Tesla, SpaceX. He wants, and I think this is completely fair, but he wants people who all they care about is, we just want to work as hard as possible. And I think I realized in myself, and I was jokingly talking with a friend, I said, I have no close interest in becoming a billionaire, which, I mean, that's like most people. But you have that little thing when you're younger and saying, I could do this. But when I think of, and what I've realized in life is, as I'm sure you've seen yourself in running multiple businesses, there is so much stress around it. And your partner, and I know you're married, I'm sure she's your backbone there. And the amount of crap that they put up with, I look at it and I think, I quite like my life. I like the fact that I can just go for a walk with a coffee and be pretty chilled, and I feel happy. And the amount of cost that people go through, it doesn't sound like it's worth it. And it just sounds like she's looked at that again. It sounds like there's probably a bit of trauma there for her, just thinking, you know what, I did it. I never want to go back to it. So that was really profound.
Yeah, I think freedom comes in lots of different ways, isn't it? Right? Because some people are free in terms of the fact that they can choose to go for a coffee or do this, but they're mentally bound. They're bound to their business. They're bound to the consistent worry and the stress around what that might look like. And some people are bound to their job and, you know, the so-called rat race and all the other bits. But mentally, they're free. At a weekend, they can just chill out. And I know some jobs you're still tapped into it mentally, but there's a lot of jobs where people can just work, operate, and then just switch off and enjoy their life. And actually, it's on your individual journey to say, what is the freedom that I want, and you choose it effectively. And it's not to be sniffed at the path that people take, because people have different lives, people have different responsibilities as well. Yeah, and there's all sorts of different factors that come into that, and choosing your own path and what is your happiness effectively, what is your freedom.
Definitely, my friend made a really good point the other day. He said about judging people, and he said, I've realized I should stop judging people because you never know what's going on in their life. Someone could have a medical condition, someone could be clinically depressed, and it's so easy just to say, oh, you can do this. And ironically, I shot a podcast today as well, and the guest there, he mentioned the 4-hour work week as well, but I mirrored a similar point. I was out with a friend a few weeks ago, and you can always say, oh, mate, you can work harder, you can do more. And this guy, I've got so much respect for him. He is out at 4 o'clock in the morning. He's got a delivery job. He's back home at 9, 10 o'clock at night. And you can always say, oh, mate, you can make time for the gym. But right now, this period in his life, he can't. And that's fine. And he's there. And it's so easy to turn around and say, oh, well, you can do this. But equally for him right now, he knows he needs to sacrifice. He needs to provide for his siblings, and that's it. And I think that's something that as you progress in life, you realize that things are different for everyone else, and you can find your buckets of passion, and that's what's really, really important.
Yeah, no one knows what's going on behind the scenes. No one's walked in your shoes, and no one knows everything, right? About your life, and it's very hard to judge people based on limited information. And I think definitely people should just, if everyone was 10% kinder, then the world would be a substantially better place, I think. And that's it. And that's free, whether you're struggling to make ends meet or you're highly successful. I think it's very important to just try and remain humble and be nice to people, because it's free.
So well said. Dan, I've got one final question for you. What do you think Man United are going to achieve this season? Top 4, well, Premier League, and if we get any trophies?
It's tough, isn't it? Because each year they manage to find a new way to inflict pain in some way, shape, or form. This year, I think, is quite good because there's limited to low expectations from most fans. Like winning the league, for example, is almost out of the question, which is great. And I think even if Man City got relegated this year, it's still out of the question. So I think that just shows how far United are from contesting, let's say. I think top 4 will be interesting. I think as a season, there's some really good teams. And the Aston Villas have shown that there's anyone could beat anyone, really. And I think the European competitions might impact some of those Aston Villa type business, football clubs that have that, because I think they might pick up a few injuries and play a few more games, and playing that kind of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and the weekend heartbeat across the season can be tough. So hopefully that will play in United's favour, because United typically, I know the manager talks about winning cups, which is great, but it'd be nice to see United it'd be nice to see this year is just the players playing well and enjoying it, because that has not happened for such a long time, and actually just be on top of their game. And if that all happens, United will play well and be good. I think the best United can hope for this year is top 4 in a cup. I think that would be the best it could possibly be. Which cup to be determined, but I think that's probably the best it can be. Is it going to be the best? my gut tells me probably not. So whether that's not good cup competitions or not the top four or potentially both, I think that is probably where the money and the bets would flow right now. Which is a realistic view of that's 10 years of heartache and a high spirits.
If we're being pedantic, it's 11 years now. Really now. Dan, where can people find you?
LinkedIn's probably the best place, I'd say. So Dan Bedi, on LinkedIn. Yeah, happy to chat to people.
Dan, thank you for your time.
Yeah, that's probably the best place to find me. No worries, mate. Pleasure. Cheers, Joe.